The alarm clock screamed at 6:15 a.m., but Thomas Mercer was already awake. 20 years of military discipline didn't fade just because he'd traded combat boots for work boots. He rolled out of bed with the same precision that had kept him alive in 3 deployments, muscles responding before his brain fully engaged. The house felt wrong. Thomas paused at the edge of his bed, listening. No birds yet. The heating system hummed its normal tune. But something had pulled him from sleep, some instinct honed by years of watching for IEDs and sniper fire. He padded down the hallway toward the kitchen, bare feet silent on the hardwood floors. The coffee maker sat ready, programmed the night before. Everything normal. Everything, Dad. Thomas spun toward the voice. Owen stood in the kitchen doorway, 12 years old and pale as winter moonlight. His son's dark hair stuck up at odd angles, and he held his head with both hands like he was trying to keep it from splitting apart. My head feels like it's splitting. The words hit Thomas with the force of a rifle shot. Owen never complained about anything. Last year, the kid had walked half a mile on a sprained ankle without saying a word. This was different. Thomas crossed the kitchen in 3 strides, his medic training kicking in before paternal panic could take hold. He dropped to one knee, bringing himself to Owen's eye level. When did it start? Thomas asked, hands steady as he examined his son's face. Don't know. Woke up and just hurt real bad. Owen's voice came out thin and shaky, like someone's hitting me with a hammer from the inside. Thomas noted the pallor, the way Owen favored his left side, the slight tremor in his hands. None of it felt right. Owen was built tough, had inherited Thomas's high pain tolerance. For him to be this distressed meant something serious was happening. Let me check your room, Thomas said, standing. You stay right here. He walked down the hall to Owen's bedroom, flipping on the lights. The bed looked normal enough, sheets kicked to the foot, blanket twisted. But when Thomas approached the pillow, his blood went cold. Dark red stains spread across the white pillowcase, concentrated near where Owen's left ear would have rested. Fresh blood, still damp in some spots. Too much blood for a simple nosebleed, and in the wrong location entirely. Thomas lifted the pillow, examining it from every angle. The staining pattern told a story, and it wasn't one that made sense with any normal childhood injury. He'd seen enough trauma wounds to know the difference between accident and something else. He returned to the kitchen, where Owen sat slumped at the table, head in his hands. Owen, did you hurt yourself last night? Hit your head? Scratch your ear? No, Dad. I don't remember doing anything. Just want to sleep like normal. Thomas studied his son's face, looking for signs of deception. Owen had never lied to him, not once in 12 years. The kid's eyes were clear, confused, and honestly frightened. We're going to the hospital, Thomas said, grabbing his keys from the counter. Is it bad? Owen asked, looking up with eyes that seemed too young for his worry. Thomas wanted to lie, to tell his son everything would be fine. But Owen deserved honesty, even when the truth carried weight. I don't know yet, but we're going to find out. The emergency room at Redford General was nearly empty at 7 in the morning. Thomas had called ahead during the drive, explaining the situation to the triage nurse. They were taken back immediately, which told Thomas his instincts were right. This wasn't normal. Doctor Layla Vance entered the examination room 15 minutes later. She was younger than Thomas had expected, maybe mid-30s, with steady hands and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She introduced herself to Owen first, then turned to Thomas. You're the father? Yes. Thomas Mercer. This is my son, Owen. Dr. Vance nodded, pulling on latex gloves. Tell me about the symptoms. Thomas described the morning's events while Dr. Vance examined Owen. She used an otoscope to look in his ears, checked his pupils, felt around his head and neck. Her expression grew more serious as the examination progressed. Owen, I need you to tell me if anything I do hurts, she said, her voice gentle but professional. She examined his left ear more carefully, and Owen winced. There, he said. That's where it hurts worst. Dr. Vance spent several more minutes with the otoscope, then stepped back. She made notes on her chart, glanced at Thomas, then back at Owen. Owen, I'm going to have a nurse bring you some juice and crackers. You've been very brave, and I need to talk to your dad for a minute. Once Owen was settled with a nurse in the next room, Dr. Vance closed the door and faced Thomas. Her expression had shifted from professional concern to something harder. "Mr. Mercer, I need to ask you some direct questions." "Go ahead. Has Owen been in any fights recently? Any falls or accidents you might not have witnessed?" "No, nothing like that." Dr. Vance made another note. "I found inflammation and a small tear in his ear canal. The injury pattern is consistent with blunt pressure or the insertion of an object." Thomas felt his jaw tighten. "What kind of object? That's what concerns me. The tear isn't from normal childhood play or an accident. Someone caused this injury deliberately." The words hung in the air between them like smoke from a fired gun. Thomas had known something was wrong, but hearing it confirmed made his hands clench into fists. "Are you saying someone hurt my son?" "I'm saying the evidence suggests intentional harm." "Mr. Mercer, I'm legally obligated to report this to the police. Injuries like this, they're often not accidents." Thomas stared at the doctor, his mind racing through possibilities. Who had hurt Owen? Who had access to his son? The house was secure, locked tight every night. Owen never went anywhere without Thomas or Mara. The thought hit him like a physical blow, but he pushed it aside. His wife might be distant lately, might be working late more often, but she would never hurt Owen. She loved their son, didn't she? "Mr. Mercer, do you understand what I'm telling you?" Thomas focused on Dr. Vance's face. "Yes, I understand. Make the call." The Redford Police Department occupied a squat brick building on Main Street, wedged between a hardware store and a diner that had seen better decades. Detective Reuben Kearns met Thomas and Owen in the lobby, a big man with graying hair and tired eyes that seemed to catalog everything they saw. "Mr. Mercer, I'm Detective Kearns. Dr. Vance called about your son's injury." They shook hands, and Thomas noted the detective's grip firm, but not aggressive, the handshake of a man who sized up others for a living. "I appreciate you seeing us so quickly," Thomas said. "Cases involving children take priority. Let's talk in my office." Kearns led them down a hallway lined with wanted posters and community service announcements. His office was small and cluttered, with a desk covered in files and a coffee cup that looked like it had been refilled too many times. "Owen, there's a video game console in the break room. Officer Martinez can show you how to use it while your dad and I talk." Once Owen was gone, Kearns opened a file folder and clicked his pen. "Tell me about Owen's living arrangements. Who has access to him on a regular basis?" "It's just me, my wife Mara, and Owen. We live at 412 Pine Street. Mara works at the county planning office. I run a contracting business." "Any babysitters? Relatives who visit frequently?" "No babysitters. Mara's parents live in California. Mine are dead. We keep to ourselves mostly." Kearns made notes, his pen scratching against the paper. "What's Owen's bedtime routine?" "Bath, teeth, homework if he has any, then lights out by 9. He's good about it, doesn't give us trouble." "And last night? Anything unusual?" Thomas thought back, trying to remember details that had seemed unimportant 12 hours ago. "Mara was working late. Said she had a project deadline. Owen and I had dinner, watched some TV, normal stuff." "What time did your wife get home?" "I was asleep. Maybe midnight. She tries to be quiet when she comes in late." Kearns looked up from his notes. "How often does she work late?" The question carried weight, implications that made Thomas's spine stiffen. "Once or twice a week. Sometimes more if they're busy." "Has there been any discord in your household? Arguments? Discipline issues with Owen?" "No arguments. Owen's a good kid, doesn't need much discipline. And Mara and I." Thomas paused, wondering how much to share. "We're going through a rough patch, but nothing that would affect Owen." "What kind of rough patch?" Before Thomas could answer, the office door opened. Mara stepped inside, looking harried and slightly out of breath. She wore her work clothes, dark slacks, and a blue blouse, and her blonde hair was pulled back in a ponytail that had come loose during what must have been a rush drive from her office. "I came as soon as I got your message," she said, her eyes moving between Thomas and Detective Kearns. "Where's Owen? Is he okay?" Thomas stood. "He's fine, playing video games with an officer." Mara moved toward the empty chair next to Thomas, but Kearns held up a hand. "Mrs. Mercer, I presume? I'm Detective Kearns. I was just asking your husband about Owen's injury. It's nothing serious, right? Kids hurt themselves all the time." Kearns studied her face. Your son has a tear in his ear canal and significant bleeding. The doctor believes it was caused intentionally. Mara's reaction surprised Thomas. Instead of shock or anger, she seemed almost annoyed, like someone had interrupted her busy day with a minor inconvenience. That's ridiculous, she said, settling into the chair. Owen must have scratched himself in his sleep. He does that sometimes when his allergies act up. Thomas turned to stare at his wife. Owen doesn't have allergies. He's been scratching at his ears lately. I've seen him do it. When? I've never seen him scratch his ears. Mara waved a hand dismissively. You're not home as much as I am. There are things you don't notice. Detective Kearns watched the exchange with interest, his pen poised over his notepad. Mrs. Mercer, where were you last night between midnight and 6 a.m.? At work. I told Thomas the first had a deadline. Can anyone verify that? I was alone in the office. Security might have footage of me coming and going. Kearns made more notes. We'll need to check that. For now, I'd like to speak with Owen, get his version of events. They brought Owen back into the office, and he settled into the chair between his parents. Thomas noticed something that made his stomach clench when Mara placed her hand on Owen's shoulder in what should have been a comforting gesture. Owen stiffened. The reaction was subtle, barely noticeable, but Thomas had spent 12 years learning his son's body language. Owen was uncomfortable with his mother's touch. That wasn't normal. Owen had always been affectionate with both parents, quick to hug and cuddle. Owen, Detective Kearns said, I need you to think really hard about last night. Did anyone come into your room? Did you hear any noises that woke you up? Owen frowned, concentrating. I don't think so. I was really tired. Slept hard. Do you remember your ear hurting before you went to bed? No, sir. It was fine when I brushed my teeth. Kearns asked a few more questions, but Owen couldn't provide any useful information. The interview concluded with instructions for Thomas to bring Owen back if any new symptoms developed, and a promise that the investigation would continue as they walked to the parking lot. Mara fell in a step beside Thomas. This is all overblown, she said. Kids get hurt. It doesn't mean someone attacked him. Thomas helped Owen into the truck, then faced his wife. The doctor said the injury was intentional. Doctors don't know everything. They have to cover themselves legally, so they assume the worst. Something in her tone bothered Thomas. The way she dismissed serious concerns like they were nothing more than paperwork hassles. But he kept his thoughts to himself as they drove home, Owen dozing in the passenger seat. That night, after Owen was asleep, Thomas lay in bed listening to Mara's breathing. She had claimed to be exhausted, had gone to sleep almost immediately after dinner. But her breathing was too controlled, too measured. She was awake, pretending to sleep. Thomas stared at the ceiling and wondered what his wife was hiding. Thomas waited until Mara left for work the next morning before he made his move. She had kissed Owen goodbye, ruffled his hair, played the part of concerned mother. But Thomas had watched Owen's reaction, that same subtle stiffening, the way his son's shoulders tensed under his mother's touch. Dad, do I have to go to school today? Owen asked, poking at his cereal. No, take the day off. Let that ear heal up. Thomas had called in sick to his own job, canceling a kitchen renovation that would have to wait. Some things mattered more than money, and right now, nothing mattered more than figuring out what had happened to his son. After Owen settled in front of the TV with his breakfast, Thomas climbed the stairs to the master bedroom. The baby monitor base station sat on Mara's nightstand, a relic from Owen's early years when asthma attacks had sent them rushing to the hospital in the middle of the night. They had never bothered to remove it, though Thomas couldn't remember the last time they had checked the recordings. The system stored footage for 72 hours before overriding itself. If something had happened 2 nights ago, the evidence might still be there. Thomas connected the base station to his laptop and began scrolling through the timestamps. Owen typically went to bed around 9, so Thomas started there and moved forward. For hours, the footage showed nothing but Owen sleeping peacefully in his bed. Then, at 1:47 a.m., the bedroom door opened. Thomas leaned closer to the screen, his pulse quickening. A figure entered the room, moving carefully in the darkness. The camera's night vision mode made everything green and grainy, but the intruder was clearly adult-sized, definitely male based on build and movement. The man approached Owen's bed and stood there for several minutes, just watching. Then he reached down toward Owen's head. The camera angle made it difficult to see exactly what he was doing, but his hands were clearly near Owen's face and ears. The entire encounter lasted 15 minutes. The intruder left as quietly as he had come, closing the door behind him with careful precision. Thomas rewound the footage and watched it again, focusing on the moment when the camera caught part of the man's face as he turned toward the door. The image was blurry, but distinctive enough sharp features. Dark hair, maybe 40 years old. Thomas had never seen the man before. He saved the footage to his laptop's hard drive and made backup copies on 2 flash drives. Then he sat back in his chair, staring at the frozen image on his screen. Someone had entered his house in the middle of the night, done something to his sleeping son, and left without waking anyone. The security system hadn't been triggered, which meant the intruder either knew the code or had been let in by someone with access. Someone like Mara. Thomas felt the familiar calm that had carried him through firefights and IED explosions, the deadly focus that separated survival from death. He had learned patience in the army, had learned to observe and plan before striking. His father had taught him something else. You can't forgive a rattlesnake bite. You kill the snake. But first, he had to identify the snake that he thought about the past year, the changes in Mara's behavior that he had attributed to work stress and marital problems. The late nights, the secretive texts, the new jewelry she claimed to have bought herself, the way she had reacted at the police station, dismissive and unconcerned about Owen's injury. Thomas closed the laptop and went downstairs to check on Owen. His son was still on the couch, watching cartoons and looking more alert than he had the day before. "How's the head feeling?" Thomas asked. "Better. Still hurts a little, but not bad." Thomas sat on the edge of the couch. "Owen, I need you to think about something for me. Have you had headaches before yesterday? Maybe not as bad, but still noticeable?" Owen considered the question seriously. "Yeah, actually, the last couple months maybe. Usually at night or in the morning." "How often?" "I don't know. Maybe once a week. I figured it was just growing pains or whatever." Thomas felt his jaw clench. "Did you tell your mom about the headaches?" "Once or twice. She said I was probably dehydrated and gave me some tea to help me sleep better." "Tea?" "Yeah, this herbal stuff. Tasted weird, but she said it would help." Thomas kept his expression neutral, but inside, pieces of a puzzle were clicking into place. Mara had never shown interest in herbal remedies before. She was strictly a medicine cabinet type, reaching for ibuprofen at the first sign of a headache. "When was the last time she gave you the tea?" 2 nights ago, I think. Before bed. The same night someone had entered Owen's room. The same night, Owen had woken up with a bleeding ear and excruciating pain. Thomas reached over and pulled his son into a hug, feeling Owen relax against him. No stiffening, no tension. Just a 12-year-old boy seeking comfort from his father. "Dad, is something wrong? Like really wrong?" Thomas held Owen a little tighter. "I don't know yet, son, but I'm going to find out." Thomas spent the rest of the day studying the baby monitor footage, enhancing the image quality as much as his software would allow. By evening, he had a clearer picture of the intruder's face, sharp cheekbones, dark hair with some gray at the temples, a narrow nose with a slight bend that suggested it had been broken at some point. The man looked familiar in the way strangers sometimes did, like someone glimpsed in a crowd or across a restaurant. But Thomas was certain he had never met him personally. After Owen went to bed, Thomas began his search. He started with social media, using facial recognition apps to scan through hundreds of profiles connected to Mara's accounts. Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. He examined every face, looking for the man who had violated his son's bedroom. That IT took 3 hours, but he found him. Norman Tolliver, age 43, pharmaceutical sales representative for Bergen Medical Supply, based in Portland. His LinkedIn profile showed 15 years in pharmaceutical sales, with access to hospitals and medical facilities throughout Oregon. His Facebook page displayed the typical markers of middle-class success: nice house, expensive car, vacation photos from tropical beaches, and a wife named Kira, who appeared in only the older photos. Thomas dug deeper, cross-referencing Norman's business travel schedule with Mara's late work nights. The correlation was nearly perfect. When Norman claimed to be on overnight sales calls in Redford, Mara, claimed to be working late at the county office. Thomas screenshotted everything, building a file of evidence that painted a clear picture of an affair. But an affair didn't explain why Norman had been in Owen's bedroom, didn't explain the injury or the mysterious tea. The next morning, Thomas called Bergen Medical Supply and asked to speak with Norman Tolliver. The receptionist informed him that Mr. Tolliver was on a sales call and wouldn't be available until the following week. Thomas thanked her and hung up. Already formulating his next move, he found Kira Tolliver's contact information through a business directory. She worked as a real estate agent in Portland. Thomas called her office and introduced himself as a potential client looking to relocate from Redford. "I'd be happy to meet with you," Kira said, her voice professional and warm. "I have an opening this afternoon if you're available to drive up." They met at a coffee shop in downtown Portland, a trendy place with exposed brick walls and the kind of artisanal coffee that cost more than Thomas typically spent on lunch. Kira was younger than he had expected, maybe early 30s, with short red hair and tired eyes that suggested she hadn't been sleeping well. "So you're looking to move from Redford?" she asked, settling into a booth with her coffee. "Potentially. My work situation is changing, and I'm exploring options." Thomas sipped his coffee, noting the way Kira's hands trembled slightly around her cup. "Actually, I was hoping you might know someone in your industry." "Norman Tolliver?" He mentioned he knew people in real estate. Kira's face went pale. "How do you know Norman?" "We met a few times through mutual friends. Seems like a nice guy." "Nice guy." Kira laughed, but there was no humor in it. "That's not how I describe my husband." Thomas leaned forward, sensing an opening. "Husband? I thought he was single, legally married, practically divorced. Norman has been busy with other interests lately." "I'm sorry to hear that." Kira studied Thomas's face, as if trying to decide how much to reveal to a stranger. "Are you really looking to buy a house, Mr. Mercer?" Thomas had given her a false name, but something in her tone suggested she knew he wasn't being entirely honest either. "I'm looking for information about Norman. My reasons are personal." "Join the club." Kira took a long sip of her coffee. "Let me guess your wife has been working late a lot recently." Thomas felt his stomach drop. "How did you know that?" "Because Norman's been taking a lot of overnight business trips to Redford. Funny thing is, his sales territory doesn't actually cover Redford anymore. Hasn't for 6 months." They sat in silence for a moment, two people connected by betrayal and deception. "There's something else," Kira said, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. "Norman has access to restricted drugs through his job. Medical samples, prescription medications, things that aren't supposed to leave the hospital." "What kind of drugs?" "All kinds. Pain medications, sedatives, experimental compounds. He's supposed to turn in and use samples, but I don't think he always does." Kira paused, studying Thomas's face. "A few months ago, he was bragging about some new medication that could cause severe headaches, dizziness, even bleeding in the ears if given in small doses over time." Thomas felt the coffee turn bitter in his mouth. Why would he brag about something like that? Norman likes to feel important, likes to show off his insider knowledge. He said it was designed to treat inner ear disorders, but in the wrong dosage, it could cause all sorts of problems. Kira leaned across the table. "Mr. Mercer, what's really going on? Why are you asking about my husband?" Thomas made a decision that went against every instinct trained into him by years of military service. He told her the truth. Kira listened to Thomas's story without interruption, her expression growing darker with each detail. When he finished, she stared in her coffee cup for a long time before speaking. "I knew Norman was having an affair," she said. "I just didn't know it involved hurting a child. Can you help me prove it? What do you need?" Thomas pulled out his phone and showed her the enhanced screenshot from the baby monitor footage. "Is this your husband?" Kira studied the image, zooming in on the facial features. "That's him. That's definitely Norman. Would you be willing to testify to that?" "Absolutely." Kira's voice carried a steel edge that reminded Thomas of soldiers preparing for battle. "What else do you need?" "Information about the drug he mentioned. Names, effects, anything that might help identify what they gave my son." Kira nodded. "I can get that. Norman keeps samples in our basement, locked in a medical cabinet. He thinks I don't know the combination, but I've been watching him for months." Thomas felt something loosen in his chest, The first real hope he'd experienced since finding blood on Owen's pillow. "Why are you willing to help me?" "Because Norman's been lying to me for years, and I'm tired of being his victim. Because no child should suffer for adult stupidity." Kira met his eyes. "And because I want him to pay for what he's done." They exchanged contact information and agreed to meet again the following day. Thomas drove home with his mind racing, already planning his next moves. That evening, after Owen was asleep, Thomas began cross-checking dates. He pulled out Mara's work calendar, Norman's social media posts, and his own notes about Owen's headaches and late nights. The pattern was undeniable that Owen's headaches had begun 2 months ago, always on nights when Mara claimed to be working late. Those same nights corresponded with Norman's supposed business trips to Redford. The injuries matched the symptoms of the drug Kira had described. But Thomas needed more concrete proof before he could act. He waited until Mara left for work the next morning, then sat down at their shared computer. Mara had always been careless with passwords, using variations of their anniversary date and Owen's name for everything. Thomas tried several combinations before finding the right one for her cloud storage account. The files were organized by date, mostly work documents and photos. But buried in a folder labeled insurance documents were encrypted chat logs between Mara and someone identified only as NT. Thomas recognized the pattern Norman Tolliver. The earliest messages were typical affair communications, arranging meetings and expressing frustration with their respective spouses. But as Thomas scrolled through more recent conversations, the content became darker. NT. Phase 2 needs to start soon. Can't keep making excuses for overnight trips. Mara, I know, but we have to be careful. Thomas is suspicious about everything lately. NT. The doses are working. Kids showing all the right symptoms. Mara, doctor visit yesterday went perfectly. They think Thomas might be abusing him. NT. Once CPS gets involved, ensuring custody will be simple. Mara, what about the detective? He seems skeptical. NT. Kearns dated your sister, right? He'll be sympathetic to your story if you play it right. Thomas read the messages 3 times, each pass making his anger burn hotter. They had planned this. They had deliberately drugged his son, caused him pain and terror, all to frame Thomas as an abusive father and steal custody in a divorce proceeding. The most recent message was from 2 days ago, just hours after their visit to the police station. Mara had to give him a stronger dose last night. He was asking too many questions about the T.T. That's fine. Stronger symptoms make the case more convincing. Just don't leave any evidence. Mara, I know what I'm doing. Thomas will be out of the picture soon, and we can be together without sneaking around. Thomas copied all the files to an encrypted drive, then cleared the computer's browser history. He had his proof, but he needed more. He needed them to confess on record. In a way that couldn't be dismissed or explained away, he called Kira and asked her to meet him that evening. The abandoned warehouse district on the edge of Redford provided perfect cover for Thomas and Kira's clandestine meeting. Thomas arrived first, parking his truck behind a pile of rusted shipping containers. Kira's car pulled up 5 minutes later, headlights cutting through the gathering dusk. "Did you find anything?" Thomas asked as she approached. Kira held up a small pharmacy bottle. Ototoxin 7, experimental compound for treating Meniere's disease. In therapeutic doses, it reduces inner ear pressure. In higher concentrations, it causes severe headaches, dizziness, and can tear the delicate tissues in the ear canal. Thomas examined the bottle, noting the hospital labels and serial numbers. How much would it take to cause Owen's symptoms? According to the documentation I found, just a few drops in liquid would be enough. It's tasteless and odorless, perfect for disguising in tea or juice. Kira's voice carried disgust. Norman had detailed notes about dosage and effects. He's been planning this for months. Thomas pocketed the bottle. I found encrypted messages between Norman and my wife. They've been discussing Phase 2 and ensuring custody. They want to frame me as abusive so Mara can get full custody in a divorce. What's Phase 2? I don't know yet, but I'm not waiting to find out. Thomas pulled out his phone and showed Kira a text message. I sent this to Norman an hour ago from a burner phone. The message read, "Your wife suspects you're having an affair. She hired a private investigator who has evidence linking you to drug tampering. Need to meet tonight to discuss damage control. He responded. Kira asked. Immediately. Wants to meet at Mara's office at 9 p.m. to deal with the problem. Kira smiled grimly. So we're going to record them. We need to get into that office and plant surveillance equipment before they arrive. Are you sure you want to do this? If we get caught, Norman destroyed my marriage and helped torture a 12-year-old boy. I'm sure. They spent an hour going over the plan. Mara's office building had minimal security after hours, just a single guard who made rounds every 2 hours. The county planning office was on the 3rd floor, accessible through a stairwell that was rarely monitored. At 8 p.m., Thomas and Kira approached the building through the back parking lot. Thomas had brought equipment from his contracting business lockpicks, small drill bits, and wireless recording devices that he typically used for troubleshooting job sites. The stairwell door yielded to Thomas's lockpicks within minutes. They climbed to the 3rd floor and found Mara's office, a modest space with a desk, filing cabinets, and 2 visitor chairs. Thomas placed one recording device under Mara's desk and another behind a framed photo on the bookshelf. The devices were voice-activated and would record for up to 4 hours. He also positioned a small camera behind a stack of binders, angled to capture the entire office. Testing, Kira whispered into the air. Thomas checked his phone, confirming that both audio feeds were coming through clearly. We're set. Let's get out of here. They retreated to Thomas's truck in the parking lot, positioning themselves with a clear view of the building entrance. At 9:04 p.m., Norman's silver sedan pulled into the lot, followed 2 minutes later by Mara's Honda. Thomas watched his wife walk into the building with another man and felt the last remnants of their marriage crumble to dust. There was no going back from this moment. No possibility of forgiveness or reconciliation to in the army. Thomas had learned to compartmentalize emotions, to focus on the mission while personal feelings waited their turn. Tonight's mission was simple: gather evidence to protect his son and destroy the people who had hurt him. Everything else could wait. Thomas and Kira sat in the truck's cab, listening to the surveillance feed through wireless earbuds. For the first 10 minutes, they heard only muffled conversation and footsteps as Norman and Mara settled into the office. Then the real conversation began. This is a disaster. Norman's voice came through clearly. If someone really has evidence. Calm down, Mara interrupted. It's probably just a fishing expedition. Thomas is suspicious, but he doesn't know anything concrete. Your husband isn't stupid, Mara. He was a combat medic, trained to notice details. If he started to put pieces together, then we accelerate the timeline. I've been slipping doses to Owen for 2 months. The symptoms are well documented, and the hospital already suspects Thomas of abuse. Thomas gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles went white. Hearing his wife casually discuss poisoning their son made him want to storm into that building and end this immediately. But he forced himself to wait, to let them dig their graves deeper. The detective is sympathetic to me, Mara continued. Reuben always had a thing for my sister, and he's willing to believe Thomas might be violent. One more incident, maybe something that requires another hospital visit, and CPS will remove Owen from the home. What kind of incident? I don't know. Something that looks like escalating abuse. Maybe a black eye or a broken arm. Kira grabbed Thomas's arm as he started to move toward the door. Wait, she whispered. Let them finish. Norman's voice was troubled. I don't like the idea of causing more serious injuries. The ear canal tear was bad enough. It was necessary. Owen was starting to ask questions about the tea, getting suspicious. We needed something dramatic to focus attention on Thomas. How did you even get him to drink it? Kids usually notice when something tastes wrong. Mara laughed, and the sound made Thomas's blood run cold. I told him it was special sleepy time tea that would help with growing pains. He trusted me completely, drank every drop without question. And the night I came to his room, he was unconscious from the sedative I mixed in. You could have set off fireworks, and he wouldn't have woken up. Thomas felt sick. They had drugged his son into unconsciousness, then deliberately injured him while he was helpless. The casual cruelty of it was beyond anything he had imagined. The important thing now is making sure Thomas looks guilty, Norman said. If this investigation goes deeper, they might find traces of the ototoxin in Owen's system. I've been washing his clothes and bedding with bleach. Any residue should be gone by now. What about the chat logs? Encrypted and stored off-site. Even if Thomas hacked my computer, he couldn't access them without the decryption key. Thomas smiled grimly. Mara had always overestimated her technical skills. I still think we should consider backing off, Norman said. Find another way to be together that doesn't involve framing your husband for child abuse. No. Mara's voice turned sharp. I'm tired of living this double life. Tired of pretending to be the perfect wife and mother. Thomas is boring, predictable, and he'll never give me the life I want. With him out of the picture and Owen in my custody, we can start fresh. And if Owen tells someone what really happened, he doesn't know what really happened. As far as he's concerned, he's been sick and his father might be hurting him. Kids are easy to manipulate if you know what buttons to push. Thomas had heard enough. He pulled out his phone and stopped the recording, then copied the audio files to his email and sent them to 3 different accounts for safekeeping. That's everything we need, he told Kira. What now? Thomas thought about his options. He could take the evidence to Detective Kearns, but Mara had been right about the detective's sympathies. Kearns might bury the investigation or find ways to discredit the recording. He could take it to the district attorney, but prosecutors moved slowly and carefully. By the time they build a case, Mara and Norman might have time to cover their tracks or disappear entirely. But there was a third option, one that guaranteed immediate action and public accountability. Do you know Haley Cross? Thomas asked, the investigative reporter. I've seen her stuff in the Portland Tribune. She specializes in exposing corruption and abuse of power. If we give her this story, it'll be front-page news within 48 hours. Kira nodded. And once it's public, they can't cover it up or make it disappear. Thomas started the truck. Let's go ruin their lives. They drove to an all-night diner and used the Wi-Fi to research Haley Cross's contact information. Thomas found her personal email address through a Journalism Association directory and crafted a message explaining the situation. He attached the audio recordings, the baby monitor footage, photos of Owen's injury, and screenshots of the encrypted chat logs. The response came back within an hour.mr. Mercer, this is exactly the kind of story I investigate. Can you meet me tomorrow morning? I'll need to verify the evidence and get official statements. If everything checks out, I can have this published within 2 days. Haley Cross Thomas felt a weight lift from his shoulders. For the first time since finding blood on Owen's pillow, he believed justice might actually be possible. Haley Cross was nothing like Thomas had expected. She was younger, maybe 35, with short blonde hair and intense blue eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of their meeting. She arrived at the diner with a laptop bag and a digital recorder, ready for business. I've reviewed your evidence, she said, settling into the booth across from Thomas and Kira. If it's authentic, this is one of the most disturbing cases of child abuse and conspiracy I've ever encountered. It's authentic, Thomas said. I can provide you with the original files, timestamps, metadata, whatever you need to verify. Haley nodded. I'll need that, plus official statements from both of you, medical records from Owen's hospital visit, and confirmation from independent sources. Over the next 6 hours, they went through everything systematically. Haley verified the baby monitor footage with a digital forensics expert, confirmed Norman's access to restricted medications through hospital contacts, and traced the encrypted chat logs to their source servers. She also interviewed Dr. Layla Vance, who confirmed that Owen's injuries were consistent with deliberate trauma, and obtained security footage from Mara's office building that showed both Norman and Mara entering and leaving at the times indicated in Thomas's surveillance. This is rock solid, Haley said finally. I can't find any holes in your evidence. The story will run in tomorrow morning's edition, both print and online. What about the police investigation? Thomas asked. Once this goes public, they'll have no choice but to act. The district attorney's office won't be able to ignore evidence this clear, especially with public attention focused on the case. That night, Thomas lay awake staring at the ceiling. Owen slept peacefully in the next room, unaware that his life was about to change dramatically. By tomorrow evening, the whole state would know what Mara and Norman had done to him. Thomas felt no satisfaction in anticipating their downfall, only a cold determination to see justice served. Some people might call it revenge, but Thomas saw it as necessary consequence. Actions had results, and Mara and Norman were about to learn what their actions had earned them. At 6 a.m., Thomas's phone started ringing. Reporters asking for comments. By 7 a.m., his email was flooded with interview requests. By 8 a.m., news vans were parked outside his house. Haley Cross's story had gone viral. Local mother and lover accused of drugging child to frame father dominated every news cycle in Oregon. The article included photos of Norman and Mara, detailed descriptions of their conspiracy, and expert analysis of the medical evidence. The reaction was swift and merciless. Norman was fired from Bergen Medical Supply within hours of the story's publication. By noon, he was in custody on charges of possession of controlled substances with intent to harm, conspiracy to commit child abuse, and breaking and entering. Mara was arrested at her office, led away in handcuffs while local news cameras captured every moment. The county placed her on immediate administrative leave pending investigation. The state issued an emergency order granting Thomas full custody of Owen, with supervised visitation rights for Mara contingent on the outcome of her trial. Detective Kearns found himself under investigation by Internal Affairs for his handling of the case, with specific questions about his relationship with Mara's family and potential bias in his investigation. Thomas watched the news coverage from his living room. Owen beside him on the couch. His son was still processing what had happened, still trying to understand that his mother had deliberately hurt him. "Dad, why did Mom want to hurt me?" Owen asked during a commercial break. Thomas considered lying, offering some comforting explanation that would preserve Owen's innocence a little longer. But Owen deserved the truth, even when it was ugly. "Some people make bad choices when they want something badly enough," Thomas said. "Your mom wanted a different life, and she was willing to hurt people to get it. Even me, even you. I'm sorry, son. You didn't deserve any of this." Owen leaned against Thomas's shoulder. "Will she go to jail?" "Probably. For a long time." "Good," Owen said quietly. "I don't want to see her anymore." Thomas held his son close and watched their old life burn to ash on the television screen. 3 weeks later, Thomas drove to the county jail for a visit he had been dreading. Mara had requested to see him, claiming she had important information about the case. Her lawyer had implied she might be willing to cooperate with prosecutors in exchange for a reduced sentence. Thomas doubted that was her real motivation. The visiting room was stark and utilitarian, with plastic chairs and tables bolted to the floor. Security cameras watched from every corner, and a guard stood by the door with the bored expression of someone who had seen everything. Mara entered wearing an orange jumpsuit that made her skin look sallow and tired. Her hair had been cut short, regulation length, and she had lost weight during her 3 weeks in custody. She looked older, diminished, nothing like the woman Thomas had married 15 years ago. She sat across from him without speaking, her hands clasped on the table between them. "You wanted to see me," Thomas said. "I wanted to explain." "There's nothing to explain. I heard the recording. I read your messages. I know exactly what you did." Mara's eyes filled with tears, but Thomas felt no sympathy. He had seen too much, learned too much about her capacity for cruelty. "I never meant for it to go so far," she said. "It started as just an affair, a way to feel something other than trapped and bored. But when Norman suggested we could be together permanently, you decided to destroy our son to get what you wanted. I thought he would be okay. Norman said the drug wouldn't cause permanent damage, just symptoms that would make you look bad in court." Thomas leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "You drugged our 12-year-old son. You made him drink poison while he trusted you completely. You let a stranger violate his bedroom while he was unconscious. I know it was wrong, but there's no but Mara. There is no excuse, no justification, no explanation that makes what you did acceptable." Mara wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Thomas, please. I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. But Owen needs both his parents. He needs his mother. Owen doesn't want to see you. He told me so himself. He's 12 years old. He doesn't understand. He understands that his mother betrayed him in the worst possible way. He understands that you hurt him and try to blame his father. He's smarter than you gave him credit for. Mara's composure finally cracked. I'm begging you, Thomas. Find it in your heart to forgive me. For Owen's sake, for the family we used to be. Thomas studied her face, noting the desperation and fear beneath her tears. Part of him remembered loving this woman, remembered believing they would grow old together. But that woman was gone, replaced by someone capable of unspeakable cruelty. You drugged our son and tried to destroy me, Thomas said, his voice steady and cold. Forgiveness isn't in my vocabulary. He stood to leave, but Mara reached across the table and grabbed his wrist. Wait, please just... Thomas pulled his arm free and looked down at her. You made your choice, Mara. Now you live with the consequences. He walked out of the visiting room without looking back. I in the parking lot. Owen waited in the truck, doing homework on a clipboard balanced against his knees. Thomas climbed into the driver's seat and started the engine. How'd it go? Owen asked. It went exactly the way it needed to go. As they drove home, the radio played a news update about the case. Norman had taken a plea deal, agreeing to testify against Mara in exchange for a reduced sentence. He would serve 8 years in federal prison. Mara faced trial on multiple felony charges and could receive up to 20 years if convicted. The prosecutor was confident about the case, calling it one of the most clear-cut examples of conspiracy and child abuse she had ever seen. Thomas didn't smile when he heard the news. Victory wasn't joy. It was survival. The people who had threatened his son were neutralized. Owen was safe, healing, learning to trust again. They had a future together, a chance to build something clean from the wreckage of their old life. That was enough. Thomas reached over and put his hand on Owen's shoulder, not out of softness, but out of assurance. Nobody would touch his son again. He would make sure of that. As they pulled into their driveway, Owen looked up from his homework. Dad, are we going to be okay? Thomas turned off the engine and looked at his son, the only family that mattered, the only person worth protecting. Yes, Thomas said. We're going to be fine.